You're live.
All
Good
right.
evening, everybody. Thank you, virtual audience, for joining us. I'm speaking into the camera. And thank you. It's so wonderful to see so many of you. Is it fun to come back out again? It's so different than the before times, right? I know. I think we're all getting used to it. So given the price of gas and the high temperatures, I really appreciate your dedication for coming. So Nelson, DeMille, I probably don't need to introduce you two since you're all here for Nelson. But anyway, it has been, I'm trying to think, Nelson, was it like 5 years ago?
I'm thinking, I think it might be 5 or 6, yeah, for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And he was with another younger author who is a hero worshiper called Michael Carita. Many of you may know Michael. And we did an event, and Michael was wonderful.
Yeah.
So tonight we're going to initiate Taylor Moore, which is the first time he's ever been to the Poison Pen, and has written 2 books, and he is a serious Nelson DeMille fan. So I will tell you before we start that my late mother, known for any of you who've been here for a very long time as MM, was a killer mystery critic. Her favorite book, like yours, was The Charm School. And when we were over in that first little bookstore on Main Street back in the early 90s, because we started the store in 1989, people would drive up in taxis or leap out of cars and rush into the store, and they'd say, "Sell me an airplane book." This is before, in-flight TV and Kindle and all the rest of it. And so we just kept The Charm School on the counter. And, every time anybody said, "Sell me an airplane book," out it went. And I can't even remember what ridiculous numbers of paperbacks we ended up selling as a result.
I thank you for your support. You've always supported me, and we love this store. This is right. It's been 5 years, and the store is legendary around the country and amongst publicists and publishers. You have to go to the Poison Pen, otherwise you haven't really done a publicity tour, right?
Yeah.
You're so nice, but I will tell you that the first 5 years of the store, I couldn't convince anyone in New York that people in Arizona read. I'm telling you, I'm really not kidding. I could not get authors here. They just wouldn't do it. And what changed it, I really think, was when we hosted Left Coast Crime the first time it came out of California in 1995. And our guest list was P.D. James, Robert B. Parker, Tony Hillerman, and Janet Ivanovich, who got an award. And I think they thought, okay, if she can do that, if we can do that, maybe we could send authors to the bookstore. And that's really when that changed. But I do think that book promotion is changing. And we have to grab every moment to come and see an author that we love, like Nelson, or to meet a new author like Taylor, because I don't know how the system is going to evolve post-COVID. I really don't. Because you've been through it. Remember when all the publishers fell in love with just television and didn't want to send anybody anywhere?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's an expense for the publisher, but it's, some authors in their contracts, have the publicity tour written in. I do not. I get shanghaied, but it's always fun. I always, I do it reluctantly, but when I'm on the road, then it becomes fun. So this is my 23rd book. So this is my 23rd book tour. I say no every time, by the way, but the first one was 1978. It was by the rivers of Babylon. This is before cell phones. This was before anything. And I remember being stuck in Cleveland. I sort of ran out of money. I needed a taxi cab, and a cop picked me up. I'm going like this. I was trying to signal. I had some money for a taxi cab. But the cop says, "What are you doing?" Cop pulled, "This is in Cleveland." I said, "I'm trying to hail a cab." He says, "You don't hail cabs in Cleveland." He says, where are you going? I said, "I have to go to a radio." And he actually took me. So, that was 1978. The next tour was 1981 during the air traffic controller strike. And I got stuck in Chicago for 4 days in a hotel. So that's how that was had a kind of rocky start with the tours. They have become easier, obviously, because of, technology and cell phones and everything else. So, 23rd book, 23rd tour. Here I am.
Yeah.
Well, Nelson gets to experience the Hotel Valley Fountain.
Oh, yeah.
Now, I've said what I'm going to say because Taylor is prepared. Taylor has actually got written questions. So, wow. So I don't want to steal his time. So Taylor, why don't you introduce yourself first?
Yeah, first of all, thanks, Barbara, for having me. It's an honor to be here, and it's an honor to be sitting with a legend. When you're a young writer looking up to people, no greater thriller writer than Nelson DeMille, so this is a true honor. Yeah, so I'm on my second book. My second came out in August. I'm working on, just turned in 3, and I'm working on 4 right now. So it's all part of the Garrett Cole series. A little bit of my background. I was in the intelligence world for a number of years. Started out at the CIA and ended up going contract military intelligence. So did that for a while, and then ended up back in Texas. I grew up on a farmer ranch in Texas, and ended up on the high plains working in the energy business. And so if you ever read the series, there's a little bit of every bit of that in the series. So that's sort of where I come from. And Nilsen, just so you know, that at the CIA, we haven't forgotten that you make us the bad guy in pretty much every novel. We're always Darth Vader, and I don't know why. I don't know why that is. We're really good people, but we haven't forgotten, just so you know.
Yeah, I do that, don't I?
But you know, back to when Barbara, when my book came out, she asked me, I can't remember how she phrased it, but it was kind of like, who's the author, or what was the book? I said, hands down, it's Nelson DeMille and The Charm School. That, in my opinion, is the perfect thriller novel. And I've said this in other interviews. I said it's the high I will be chasing the rest of my life as a reader, and it's what I'll be trying to achieve as a writer. I will be trying to give that to all my readers for the rest of my life. I'll never achieve it, but it's what I'll be chasing. And so, Barbara, that's kind of why, you know, we sort of linked up here. And so it's an honor to be here. You know, obviously we're here to talk about the Maze and John Corey, but before we do, I can't let some things go. Kind of like the CIA thing, I can't let it go. So this will be sort of a Festivus-style airing of grievances, just so you know a little bit.
I had no idea what I was unleashing.
You know, when you go live, just things go off the rails. But I've always wanted to know, with the Charm School, like a lot of readers, why was it a singleton? Why this could have made a series? We'd have followed Sam Hollis anywhere. Why not a follow-up?
Well, you know, I should say the CIA actually reached out to me after the Charm School and invited me to Langley. My wife said, if you go, I don't think you might never come back. I said, well, come with me. I actually got an invite, a formal invitation. I didn't go because for a variety of reasons, but it just kind of fell through. But, you know, when the Charm School was written, it was like 87. It was post Chernobyl, and anyway, long story short, what happened is the Cold War ended. All the Cold War writers were out of a job all of a sudden, and you know, that literally employed so many writers. It was a huge genre, if you remember, in the 60s and 70s. When the hardcover came out, the Cold War was still going. By the time the paperback came out, the wall had come down, and you know, the whole world had changed. And you know, I had so many more Cold War stories, good espionage stories in me. You know, they're still sitting there in a drawer if anybody wants them. That kind of ended it. I mean, as opposed to World War II, where people kept writing about it afterward. But so, for some strange reason, Hollywood and New York publishing, just, you know, when the Cold War ended, that was the end of books, and that was the end of the movies, and for the most part, in TV too. So that was there was no more future in the Cold War. Sometimes I wish for the Cold War back, but you know,
it might be back.
It might be back, right? So that's the answer. The Cold War ended.
Well, but the book, you know, so we were talking, you know, and back before we came out here, you know, my friend Connor Sullivan, who wrote Sleeping Bear, he's a whole generation behind me, and when I told him the story about, you know, coming here and meeting you, his eyes got big, and he said, Nelson DeMille, yeah, you know, the Charm School, that was my inspiration too. And, you know, I had him sign a book for Connor. But what do you think about that book? It shouldn't have worked, right? Because it came out after the Cold War. What gave it staying power? Why is it as good today as it was back then?
Well, it's interesting too that, you know, it is still selling. It was strong. I think maybe by strongest seller. So the hardcover came out right before the Cold War ended. The paperback, the Cold War ended. Kind of ended. I mean, wall had come down, but I think the Soviet Union was intact until '91, but it was the end. And yet it remains like I think my biggest backlist bestseller. It's also now taught, and it's actually taught in my children's high school on Long Island as a adjunct to some other Cold War stuff. It was like a novel, read this novel about the Cold War, along with the fiction. Of course, my kids, you know, it was a sophomore year, and they were like crawled under the table. And Dad's book was like, you know, I don't want any part of this. But it's also on the college level. It's nice that it's been picked as one of the Cold War, one of the 100 best espionage novels or something, some list or another. People are still fascinated by the Cold War. And I think Hollywood is missing an opportunity, and certainly publishing people are, because a lot of us want to do a retrospective. We want to go back and set a book in the 80s or the 70s, but it doesn't seem to be commercial. But there's a whole generation of, you know, like my children who are now 42 now, who kind of remember the Cold War, and I think there would be potential customers for it.
Yeah.
Well.
I think
There
you could bring.
actually is some interest in the Cold War. There are quite a few books recently coming out. I realized to my shock that 50 years is kind of the bar between contemporary fiction and historical fiction, and the 1970s is 50 years now. So we are actually moving in the realm of historical fiction.
Yeah.
And the good news about that, Nelson, is if it's historical fiction, it doesn't age, you know, because it's already done that.
Yeah. The same with Vietnam. I mean, you know, when I first got out of the Army, I spent a year in Vietnam, and I started writing. No publisher wanted to touch a Vietnam novel. It wasn't like World War II, where you know, James Jones and Norman Mailer and everybody, you know, had a novel in them. Nobody wanted to, you know, and it was 15 years after, I think, I was out of the Army that I published Word of Honor, which was my first, I did 2 Vietnam novels, Word of Honor and Upcountry. But that took 15 years, and maybe it was better for it because it was kind of more of a retrospective. But publishing didn't want to touch Cold War, and they didn't really want to touch Vietnam. But you know, some of this is coming back now that we're, you know, the people who remember it, to the extent that I remember that far back, can still write about it.
Yeah. So we'll kick off from the Cold War here and move into the present with John Corey and the Maze. It was kind of fun after, you know, Barbara mentioned doing this. I thought, okay, well, before I read The Maze, I'm going to go back and read Plum Island. I'd read it years ago and, you know, enjoyed it. But I said, I'm going to go, I kind of want to do this John Corey, you know, like where did he begin and where is he now kind of a deal. And as I went back, I think that was published in '97, if I remember correctly.
So, yeah.
And you know, John Corey is who he is. He's he says what he says, and he what he wants to say, does what he wants to do. He's cocky and he's incorrigible, and but you do something really well with him. And I know he's not everybody's favorite, but he's a lot of people's favorite. He's made some enemies over the years, right?
Mostly reviewers.
Maybe some reviewers. That's going to happen. But there is something you do with him. You do. There is a humanity and a humility that you pepper in there ever so lightly. But it is, and it makes him. There's something about him that's likable. What do you do there, and how have you done that?
Yeah, you know, when I wrote Plum Island, it was meant to be a standalone. Because I'd never done a series before. And I enjoy series. I read series, but I didn't want to do my own because it gets cumbersome when you're carrying these characters through different things over the years. So it was a standalone book, and if you remember, if anybody's read it, it looked like a standalone because it was a standalone. But I set out to create a politically incorrect character. This is kind of the beginning of political correctness. I remember sitting in a doctor's office. There was a magazine, I think it was Time, or it might have been Newsweek. There was a big front page, front cover story about political correctness, which was kind of new at the time. And I said, you know, I'm going to create a character so politically incorrect, the publisher probably won't even want to publish it. But I had a publisher who stood with me, and, you know, this guy was, you know, sort of a little over the top. So I'll tell you, it's kind of an inside story. This book is a Scribner book. I was with Simon & Schuster. And I wrote the book for Simon & Schuster, and we had some editorial, I had some editorial pushback. Is that a nice way of saying? Some younger editors, there was a real problem with this book. They didn't like John Corey. He was sexist, he was this, he was that, he was arrogant, he was alpha male, you know. I said, yeah, right. The junior editors don't have to buy the book. And
Yeah.
some of them I'm selling the book to. So, I wound up making a lateral move within the company to Scribner. I found an editor who I could work with, so this is a Scribner book. But it was kind of chilling, I think, to think that, am I on the verge of cancellation here? Is this cancel culture coming home to me? I didn't think they were going to do that, but they really wanted changes, and I would not make the changes. So I kind of got my way, and I said, yeah. So they said they wanted to expand my audience. I said, no, I'm going to lose my entire audience to change his character.
Yeah.
And if it was like a mid-list book or some newer author, and they're trying to really do something for the author, but it wasn't that. It was really censorship in many ways. I said, the John Corey books debut at #1. I think I'm doing something right. I mean, you got to convince New York publishers sometime that there's actually a country west of the Hudson River. They see it, they know it's there, they can see it from tall buildings in Manhattan. And I was totally in the right. This is the character I created. If you don't want to read it, don't read it. If you're offended by it, fine. So the New York Times reviewed it. What's her name, Barbara?
Sarah Weinman, and she calls it engaging and enraging,
Right.
which I think Nelson pointed out to me that was as good a tagline.
Right.
Yeah.
She meant to be mean, but as it turned out, we're going to use it on every ad that we can put out there. So, it started a little bit of controversy, and I don't think the controversy is over, actually. The book has only been out since Tuesday. So, but this is a little chilling to think what's going on in the business. I mean, my past publisher, Hachette, canceled Woody Allen's book, for instance, because Woody Allen had some ethical issues, but still, he had a story. This was his biography. Everybody wanted to read the biography, his autobiography, but it was canceled. It wound up being published at a small publishing house somewhere. This is not a good trend. This is not good First Amendment stuff. So I think authors are pushing back a little bit now. And it doesn't matter with your political stripe, because I mean, liberal authors are just as much against this as conservative authors. We have had enough of the woke crowd and the junior editors who are always threatening to walk out. With COVID, they walked out 3 years ago, went home to work, and nobody missed them. But so this may be one of the. But the other thing is that authors, I think, are self-censoring themselves. They sit there by themselves and they're writing a story, and they realize, oh, I shouldn't say this, I shouldn't say that, and that you can't stop. I mean, they're going to self-censor because they don't want to get involved with this kind of controversy. They don't want to get involved with the editorial pushback that they might get. Some editors, are better about it. Some authors know their editors better, and but I was kind of surprised that I had a real issue at Simon & Schuster. I had to actually make a lateral move to get, to go to another house within that, within Simon & Schuster. But all's well, it ends well. The book came out Tuesday. It may debut at #1 on the Times list next week. My only competition is my friend David Baldacci. And I always wish David well, except this week. I wish him well next week.
Well, so just so you know, if you haven't read the book, any John Corey fans out there, the greatest change I think the only change I think he's made from Plum Island to the Maze is he's gone from a .38 to a Glock 9mm. Is that about it? Yeah, is that safe to say?
Yeah, that's most politically correct. Okay. We've gone metric.
There we go. There is something there, and I like to go into a book or anything very fresh, and I know the book is just out, so I don't want to get to any kind of a spoiler. But there was a conversation that the book is a page turner, like all the John Corey books. It has this sort of slow build, and you're going, oh, that's the bad. Oh, no, that's going to be the bad guy. Oh, I think I got it figured out, and then of course, up to this climax, and it really takes off. But there was a conversation in the book that I slowed down and really maybe read a couple of times. It's a really good one with Landowski. When they're sitting in there, and it's a conversation of ethics, right?
Yeah,
and morals.
Yeah.
And I really sat and thought about it, because I thought, how does John Corey? This seems like what Landowski is saying is something he would believe in, but he's still not for it. Do you know what I'm talking about? Can you elaborate on that?
I didn't really answer your other question because it went off on.
No, that's okay.
My pet peeve was just censorship. you know, about his humanity. Yeah, and he's got a sense of, you know, he's got a sense of ethics. This is, you know, and the reviewers who review the Corey book, and I get a lot of good reviews with the other book. Corey books tend to get those kinds of reviews, like, you know, they're really more political than they are. They don't really mention this about Corey, that he's got an ethical core, and he's got a little bit of, you know, he's got some humanity. He treats people well unless they deserve not to be treated well. And, you know, but his whole professional life has been dealing with, you know, the worst elements out there. He was a homicide detective before he's doing what he's doing now. So he's seen it all. And yet, as much as he's seen, and you can imagine murders and all kinds of, you know, lying, you know, he still, you know, hasn't affected him. There's a part in the book where he says it starts to get to you, and he's concerned about Beth Penrose, his girlfriend, that she's homicide and it's going to get to her. So, you know, you gotta humanize, you know, the main character, and you do it, and, you know, the reader picks it up, but the reviewers apparently don't. They think he's a troglodyte, which of course he is.
So in this one, I had to write these down because you always have some great humor, great quotable lines. And this one from Plum Island, it occurred to me that the problem with doing nothing is not knowing when you're finished. Is that good or what? And my favorite from the maze, and this is like the first line, so I you know, I'm going to spoil anything, but it says you can't drink all day unless you start in the morning. I mean, where do these come from? I mean, are you literally writing them in the moment, or do you in the shower and you're like 5 years from now this is going to go perfect somewhere? How does that work?
You know, that's a good question, but yeah, living in New York helps, let me tell you. Hanging around the right bars help too. You know, I know a lot of cops, and where my house is kind of down the street from the county courthouse and the ADAs and the cops, and you know, you hang with these guys, and a lot of this is them. It's not so much me, and but you know, it sounds like John Corey is quick because he's very quick, but it looks quick in the book because you're reading it that way. The reality is, I can sit there for 15 minutes saying, what should he say? What's funny? I mean, he is quick, but he's also, you know, he's got what they call the New York mouth, and he's been around cops all his life. How many people read the book, by the way? Because he just came out yesterday, 2 days ago.
The Maze?
Yeah, The Maze. Yeah, The Maze. Yeah, it just came out. How many people from New York? Oh, yeah, so there's always get the New Yorkers. So you know what the New York mouth is. This is how we grow up. We used to, in the schoolyard, we started this, you know, giving people a hard time and complaining and that type of thing. And I think does it play well west of the Hudson? Well, that was the other issue I had with some of the editors. They said, you know, this might not when the first John Corey book, it might not play well west of the Hudson. Don't worry about it, you know. You know, you write it as it is. I mean, this is what you see, this is what you write. As long as the book stays true to itself, I think, you know, you're okay, you're on solid ground. So, look, here we are in Arizona, and you guys you read John Corey. You know what I mean? So many New Yorkers are offended by it, like agents and editors and reviewers are waiting for one good John Corey review. So the first one that came out was Plum Island, the first. 2 reviews in the San Francisco Chronicle, and what is the other San Francisco newspaper? I can't. Which one? Yeah. So these were 2 reviews written by women. I don't think that was me. But they both didn't like the book, but they both quoted the same line from the book. John Corey, when he first sees Beth Penrose, he says that, you know, she's well built, and he says it looks like she's smuggling balloons. We know this is sexist. We know this is sexist. That's not the point. The point is this is him saying what any cop would say. But both reviewers picked up on the same thing. They both didn't like the book, obviously, but they both picked up on that same line as an example of the most horrible thing. Gilgo Beach murders. I mean, had you heard of them?
I had not heard of them, but I'll be honest with you. I Googled it and I found myself diving into that because it's a crazy deal, right?
Yeah, I mean, they were regional. It was Gilgo Beach, still Long Island, it's part of Fire Island, and it was near the Hamptons. So it was kind of high profile, near metropolitan area. But Then there was two documentaries made about it, which were national, and some books written about it. So it did get some national exposure. And what it was is that 11 years ago, 10 murdered women were found on Gilgo Beach in the Brambles. They've been there for a long time. Somebody found one, and then because he got cadaver dogs, and they found another and another. Newsday, the local newspaper, has had last year had a headline. It said, 10 years, 10 murders, no suspects. So it's kind of an embarrassment to the local police out there, the county police, which is Suffolk County, which encompasses the Hamptons. And they can't seem to solve it. And the FBI came in, and they were stymied. It seemed like an open and shut kind of thing. Like, there's got to be forensic evidence. There's got to be somebody who knows something about this. But so far, no. As much as we all want the murders solved, I did not want them solved before my book came out because I had different speculations in the book. But, the county police chief went to jail for something else, but he was implicated, or he might have been implicated in the murders. I don't, nobody gets off easy in this book, including the DA at that time and the DA in general, politicians, the judiciary and the police. A lot of stuff was going on, a lot of corruption, a lot of incompetence. So, as somebody just said to me the other day, I live in Nassau County, so do not drive east to Suffolk County because you will not be well received by the political establishment and the police out there. But I fictionalize it because sometimes you look at things, so much nonfiction has been written about, the Gilgo Beach murders. So I said, if you fictionalize it, you can look at it differently, and you can open it up to more speculation than a nonfiction writer might. So that's what I did, and that was just, the kind of the core of the book. It was mostly to bring back John Corey and to get him, I won't give away too much, but gets back with Beth Penrose from Plum Island, and he had a wife, Kate. He had a wife, Debbie, some of us. And all the Corey books have to do with women too. I mean, his love life and that type of thing. So I think that's another element of it.
Do you think it's easier when you do something like the TWA Flight 800 or the Gilgo Beach? Is it easier to write something that's grounded, or do you find it harder to try to stick to that?
Yeah, it's much harder.
Yeah.
It's harder because, first of all, you don't want to exploit the tragedy. Here you have 10 people who were killed, and then TWA 800, the same thing. I mean, 250 people died in that crash, and you don't want to exploit it, but it's, the function of the novel is to look at these things in a different way. There's so many books written about the Kennedy assassination, fiction and nonfiction. Some of the fiction is actually, bringing out stuff that compels people to think about what actually happened. Then you got to make the decision too, how much of the real stuff do you really want to use? With TWA 800, that kid, it was Nightfall was the book. I really stuck close to the facts because I had a lot of the facts, and I knew people who worked the case, and under the Freedom of Information Act, I got a lot of the eyewitness statements who also saw a rocket going toward the plane. So I really stuck to the facts. Gilgo Beach it was such a morass, which one of the reasons is called the maze. There's two meanings of the maze. One is the political and police maze of corruption that surrounds this case, and the other one is a real physical maze where a scene takes place. That's the end scene, so I shouldn't say anything about what takes place in the maze at the end of the book. No, I won't give it away. But that was more complicated because it's an active case. The case is 11 years old, but murder cases are never really cold cases. This certainly is not. It's a very active case. And just, I think 2 days ago, they actually identified another one of the victims through some DNA. They're not all identified, but apparently they were probably all sex workers. So, the case is, I think as a novelist, you got to look at it. I've been living with it like 10 years. I knew people who worked on the case, Suffolk County homicide guys. So eventually it just hit me that let's use this case. But it was very, really challenging. I don't know if you know, it was challenging to the point where I don't think I would do it again. It's easy to make it up, but to try to stick to the facts at the same time, take dramatic license and and liberties with with the facts, because then it gets a little confusing. And but it's so far the book is working. Even with the bad reviews, the book is selling very well. Why did they tell me? I just got an email this morning that said the book is selling well.
Good. You kind of touched on this earlier, just sort of by accident. It was one of my questions, and you know, I get the question, you know, what colors my writing? You know, being a Texan colors my writing.
Sure.
Being former CIA colors my writing. For you, you kind of touched on the New Yorker side. And I was going to ask about that, how it colors your writing, but it does. I mean, having been around and just hearing the language and how people speak. But this, you know, the follow-up I was going to ask about that is, you know, you were in Vietnam. You were an infantry officer, correct?
Right.
How does that color your writing, sort of even beyond the atmospherics? You know, you've written books about Vietnam, but how, I mean, sort of like, does it, you know, create a gallows humor? I mean, how has that colored your writing through the years?
Yeah, good question. And, you know, being in the military for 3 years, you know, there's GI humor, which is kind of gallows humor, especially in, you know, in combat situations. I found it interesting when I first got shot at that guys had been there, you know, longer than me. I was really new in country. They were making jokes. They said, you know, Charlie's not really trying to kill us. They said he's just trying to scare us. They're trying to kill us, actually.
Did that make you feel any better?
No, it was like a joke. And I realized there's this kind of gallows humor that goes along with, you know, being in combat. You know, the colors, yeah, sure, I color some of the writing. Even the books that are not about Vietnam, obviously there's a lot of, most of the books have some action adventure scene, which was, you know, probably taken from my escape and evasion course in Panama. I knew there was a good reason why I was in Panama in the jungle, you know, getting chased through the jungle. I used the scene later. And also just the armaments and munitions and that type of thing. So when I was in Vietnam in 67, 68. I went back to Vietnam in 97, and the book that came out of it was Upcountry. And I went back with two guys who had served also in combat, who were friends, and we went back, and we went back to, you know, our areas of operation, and which were all the former South Vietnam, south of the DMZ. But at the end of the trip, we decided to go to the enemy capital, which is Hanoi, and we had actually a friend, Al DeMille, who was a builder on Long Island, but also an international builder. And DeMille Construction is kind of national. But he was living there in Hanoi. Why? We had no idea. Let's go see Al. Who the hell would want to live here, right? So we visited him, and he was a very good host. He actually built a clubhouse called the American Club, where we could get a hot dog and a hamburger and a Coke. And he built a small boat that we went on the Red River. He was a great host, since passed. But while we were there, he introduced me to a good friend of his, Matty Genovese, who's here tonight. I wanted to stand up, I should have preceded it by saying, Matty is the inspiration for the Susan Weber character in my book, Upcountry. She was an expat living in Hanoi, and I found it just fascinating that an American would live in this, should I say shithole? It actually wasn't that bad a place. But it was corrupt. It was corrupt. Everything you wanted to do, you had to pay somebody off. I said, how would you live here? She's from Queens, New York. She's an attorney. Why would you live here? I mean, how about, you want to be an expat? How about Paris, you know? But she'd been there many years, and so I kind of picked up brains, because in my mind I'm starting to develop, you know, the plot of the book, but also the characters. And I thought a female expat living in a place like Hanoi would be good. And she was a good addition to the book. Thank you.
I think people probably assume John Corey is your favorite protagonist because that's, you know, you have most of the, you know, the biggest number of books by him. But is he your favorite? And if not, who is and why?
No, he's not my favorite. I mean, he's the second. I mean, John Corey pays the rent for sure, you know. And, you know, he's my favorite that way. And all the Corey books just do well. But the ones that are more of a challenge are the standalone books. And I think my favorite character is John Sutter from Gold Coast. And so I got some nods. You got I'm not the only one. But and then the Gulf Coast, you know, was a different kind of book for me, and there was a lot of editorial pushback on that too. Is, you know, Nelson, you write action adventure, you write mysteries, you write espionage, you write all these. This is like, you know, a book of manners and morals and mores, and it's like this is, nobody gets, you know, nobody gets shot until the end. And I said, but it's like, it's The Godfather meets The Great Gatsby. That's what the whole book was supposed to be about. And they, reluctantly, I have to say reluctantly, said, okay, let's go with it. This is what you want to do. And it became a huge bestseller at the time, because I knew, you know, but they said the same thing. Like, all of these books that I write, are they going to play well west of the Hudson? Are we going to get foreign sales? We're going to get foreign, you know, foreign rights sales. So the Germans are going to buy it, you know. And I said, you know, they've been reading Gatsby for 70 years. Why wouldn't they read this? So sometimes, you know, the instincts of the author, and you know, Taylor, I mean, your instincts are good. Otherwise, you wouldn't be doing this. Editorial people seem, they're very clever, and they're kind of creative in some ways, but they always are second guessing you because they're panicky. We're the ones who have to write the books, but they, but you have to kind of get a go ahead no matter where you are on the pecking order. I can usually get away with almost anything, and I thought I was getting away with this Corey book, The Maze, until it actually was written and they read it. They said, oh my God, you know. Because the world had changed. And that's the other thing, you'll see as you get older, the world will change. And you got to change with it. You got to change the language a little bit. I don't mean clean it up. I mean just, you know, make sure it's not, you know, sound like a 60s hippie. And I wrote a book with my son, The Deserter, Alex, and he's 40. He's a little older now, but and I learned a lot from him because, you know, he uses the language differently, and his technology is better than mine. And he's a screenwriter, so, you know, he's able to, you know, do act 1, act 2, act 3, and, you know, the storyline, the story, you know, arc of the story, he knew that. He had never written a novel before, but I actually, you know, learned, you know, a little bit how that generation thinks, which I guess is your generation, right? Yeah, so he was 40, and he's saying, Dad, you know, people don't talk like this anymore. Whatever.
Okay. Being told I got to wrap it up, so what do I really want to ask? You know, so on that subject, I was going to ask, what is, if you could just write whatever you wanted? I mean, you're known for thrillers. You kind of took a leap. That was a bit. Would you say it's more literary? I mean, how would you describe the Gold Coast?
I would, like, you know, the Gold Coast was a little more literary. The follow-up, which was The Gatehouse, kind of the same thing, a little more literary. I mean, I have some novels in me that would take a long time, and maybe more literary and more, well, you know, the old novel, the old what were they called? Not episodic, you know, the ones that were span generations.
Oh,
what were they called?
Epic.
Epics.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have one in me about Long Island aviation. Long Island was the cradle of aviation, and you know, and then Grumman and, you know, and Charles Lindbergh took off for Paris, not too far from my house, where I am now, and this whole idea was to begin this epic novel, be a trilogy, and like World War I, when the first aviators and Amelia Earhart, well, everybody flew from Long Island in those days, and just, you know, bring it up to the space age, and publishers loved it. They loved the idea. But then I started thinking about the research and the trilogy, and, you know, but it's still doable, because now research is much easier than it was when I first thought about this book. Should we take questions?
We should,
Okay.
indeed. So feel free to call on people. Come on, raise your hands. Here's your chance.
Nice.
So when you started getting pushback from the junior editors before you changed publishers,
Yeah.
did that affect your writing process at all? Did you kind of second guess yourself for a little bit, and finally you said, no, my character is my character, I'm going to do it the way I want to do it?
Well, good question. Now, did I, you know, when I was getting pushback from the editors, but the book was already done by that point. I don't do progressive editing with the editor. Some writers like to do that and have a good editor they can work with. And I just gave it to them, and that was when the trouble started. I said, this is, you know, this is it. But did it affect Would it affect my next book? I guess is a good question. I would certainly think twice, you know, and then do what I want anyway, but I would think about it. You know? Ma'am.
Yeah, I read Lion's Game, like probably February or March before 9/11.
Oh, right.
And when I read it, and I was just like, oh my God, it's coming. Because we had just gone through 9/11, or Y2K.
You're right.
We thought things were going to happen, and some other things in our neighborhood were going on. And then when I read that book, I just thought, oh, well, gosh, that's probably likely. And then 9/11 hit.
Yeah.
What did you have some prescient
Mhm.
ideas there that you thought would be?
Yeah. I kind of wrote about 9/11 before 9/11, but no, I wasn't prescient. I mean, I was talking to these people, Joint Terrorist Task Force. They said, here's what they said to me, that the World Trade Center had been bombed already with a car bomb in the basement. I was just talking to them because it's, you know, in general, I was trying to get another John Corey book going, and they said the next attack on the World Trade Center is going to be, this is what they said exactly, Learjet, you know, with kamikaze-type pilots, and the Learjet's going to be full of explosives and gasoline, and they're going to crash into the buildings. This is what they said, and it turned out not to be Learjet, it turned out to be a commercial airline. It was hijacked, but they were close, and they knew it. This is like 2 years before it happened. So then when it happened, yeah, it was, you know, it was chilling to know that they understood that my question to them was, if there's a terrorist attack in this country, what's the target? They said the World Trade Center. They already tried it once. They're not going to give up until they knock it down. So they knew that, and they kind of figured out it was going to be by aircraft. So I worked them into the book, and it turned out, unfortunately, to be true. Ma'am.
My daughter and I read The Gold Coast at the same time, and being from the North Shore of Long Island,
Oh, yeah?
it was very poignant. We spent our evenings casting the movie. Are any of your stories or books being scripted for screen?
Casting a movie for Gold Coast, you know, it was bought. It's hard to believe this book is like over 25 years old. It was bought by Michael Bregman, who's a producer, he's a New York producer, which I like better than Hollywood producer. Bregman was good. I mean, he was known to do, you know, good solid movies, and Pacino was his partner, Al Pacino, and they made Scent of a Woman together. They'd made Carlito's Way together. So the book was bought by Bregman for Pacino to be the Godfather character, and then somebody else was going to play. Susan Sarandon was supposed to be Sutter's wife, or Susan, right? So, you know, it was all, you know, but this is what happens with movies, and it never did happen. But it's still active. I mean, almost all of my books have been optioned, and the Corey series is actually owned by Sony TV. They're trying to do a series on it. I've done a pilot script already, which has turned out to be terrible, but they're trying again. You know, so, you know, and the only movie I had made, the only major motion picture was Devil's Daughter with Travolta. But Mayday, which I co-authored with Tom Block, was a CBS TV movie, and Word of Honor, nobody knows this. It was a TNT movie when TNT had about 35 subscribers or something. It was like it was really prehistoric. But they did make Word of Honor, and with Don Johnson. Actually, had some good, you know, and Gene Triplehorn. So they had some good cast, but it was just, you know, nobody saw it because it was, nobody knew what TNT was in those days. Sir.
Yes, who would you name as your favorite author, you know, a contemporary author of literary fiction?
Oh, gosh. Taylor.
You're in trouble.
I can't. I really can't do that. I can only talk about dead authors, because if I say Michael Connelly, who was one of my favorites and a friend, you know, then it's being taped, and everybody say, well, you didn't mention Harlan Coben is also your friend, or well, David Baldacci is not my friend this week. But I would say, all the guys who, and some of the women. Janet Ivanovich, I like her stuff. So, and it depends on the book. Most people buy by author, and that's the way to buy, really. But I don't have the time to read everything, so I try to buy by book. When I get a good recommendation, like the newest Janet Ivanovich is great. You gotta read it. I also got a lot of stuff sent to me for blurbs. I got piles of books in my office sent to me either by the author or by the agent or by the publisher, the editor. Do you get a lot of requests for blurbs?
A few, but not to the level you. Not yet.
I get you couldn't read in a lifetime. You couldn't read the stuff that comes in, and I want to do it, if I can. But I want to make sure that the joke in the business is I can read your book or I can blurb your book. I can't do both, So,
those blurbs are harder than people think, aren't they?
They are, right?
Yep.
Especially if you have to read the whole book.
Yeah.
And so, and that, but getting, what they call advanced reading copies of these books, kind of see, what's coming up too. And but you guys never asked me for a blurb. I never got none. David Hightower is your editor.
Yeah.
And he's asked me for a lot of blurbs. He didn't ask me for your blurb, though. I would have done it. See, but it's hard, because I think we're all contemporaries now, Harlan Coben and I, and I remember Michael Connelly, and then David Baldacci started about the same time I did, actually a little bit after me. And we're kind of, we actually get together once in a while. There's a pub in New York, there's a bar in New York called Michael's. We get together, we used to get together the first Tuesday of every month in Michael's, and like a literary roundtable, except we didn't talk literature. We complained about our agents. And
The Algonquin Roundtable.
It's not like the Algonquin Roundtable.
I just had breakfast at Michael's, and there weren't too many authors at the bar.
Right. Susan Isaacs was with us. Mary Haynes Clark has passed. We had about 12 people, and I think the people in the restaurant thought we were really talking like really important stuff about literature. Now we were pitching about something or another. Ma'am.
I started listening to the maze, and I'm really enjoying Scott Frick reading it.
Yeah.
And it's making me laugh every morning, which is great. But I don't want it to be over, so I'm wondering how long we'll have to wait for the next one to come out.
Oh, I don't know. But Scott Frick is good. He's become the voice of John Corey. He's a good guy. The next John. Well, the whole issue here is, will there be another John Corey? Do I want to go through this again? Do I need to change publishers again? I don't know. I think a lot of this depends on, how this book does. It's going to do fine. I mean, it'll debut at number 1 or 2, I'm sure. Me, Baldacci, or Baldacci, me. There might be other things. Stephen King's got a book out, and he's great. He's a great, incredible writer. And it also depends, unfortunately, on, the movie thing or the TV series. So, I fantasize that, the publishers are pushed back on, there's a pushback on the Corey book. Once it becomes a successful series, they're going to be coming to me, begging me, for another Corey book. But it's not in the works right now. Yeah.
I just wanted to give a shout out to Patricia,
Oh.
who answers all my emails.
Yeah.
Don't make sure you keep her on board. A retired librarian. I know it takes a village. And kudos to Alex. That was really great.
Oh,
great
thank you.
review.
Yeah.
And who do you have? Who would you have John Corey be on the film?
Oh, John Corey. It was when I began with John Corey in 1997. It was going to be Bruce Willis in my head, and then Bruce Willis had actually heard about this book. I don't think he read much, but he actually called my office. I don't know where he got the number. My secretary said, Bruce Willis is on the phone. I said, really? I mean, is he selling? What is he selling? Like aluminum siding today? No, she says, Bruce Willis. I recognize his voice. Pick it up. Pick it up. So I did, and he said to me, he says, I understand I'm supposed to be John Corey, whoever the hell that is. We actually had a mutual friend too, so we talked about it, and I said this would be great, and I'll have my agent talk to your agent. And he was interested, but it never came to pass. So, you know, but now he's like a lot of the people that I thought about, you know, because they're kind of like, John is frozen in time.
Yeah. So it's 7 years, right, from Plum Island to, is that right?
I don't even think it's 7 years, but it's, you know, the external real chronology is from 1997 to now, so it's 25 years that the series has been going on, but the internal chronology of the book is probably compressed to about 4 years. If you look at it, you'll see, like this last book, the new one, there's a drone in the book, and the editor, you know, legitimately questioned me with the drones at that time, because you're talking about now late 90s or early 2000s. And there were, I mean, I looked it up, and so you have to, that's the thing with the series, the series, if it's successful, goes on. When Agatha Christie died, the New York Times had a front page obituary, but it wasn't of Agatha Christie, it was of Hercule Poirot, her character. It was very clever what they did. And they estimated that Poirot was about 107 years old, which is probably what he was. And that is always the problem with the series, especially, you know, a successful series. No, Corey's about 44, and he's going to stay 44. 44, 44, yeah. Yeah, well, yeah, he would actually make a good, you know, yeah. But all these people that I want to play the part, either going to get, by the time they do this, he's going to be old. And Sony is very active on it now because of all the TV needs a lot of product, and they also, a lot of these, like Michael Connelly's Harry Bosch is successful, and a few others. So they really, that's why they want to, they realize that these series, and don't forget we went through a period of defund the police, and all of a sudden that had a chilling effect on a lot of these police series. In fact, one of them was actually canceled, I believe. But that's sort of gone now, so, you know, we're back.
Well,
Sir, well, I guess
more
last one.
question?
I appreciate you coming out, but my wife was pregnant with our third. She, I got college too.
That's cool.
Thank you.
But, love the books. I love everything on Audible.
Yeah.
But, do you pick the narrator? Does the publisher pick it?
It's a good question. You know, in the beginning, when these books on tape, which is what they were called, they were just hard to find people to narrate. Sometimes the author would narrate, but a book takes about 16 to 18 hours to read, and if you're narrating it, you're not doing it on first take, so it could take a whole week in a student. Now, I did a short story once of mine. It was like, short story should have taken maybe should have taken an hour to, you know, but it took me like 7 hours. And so, but they asked me if I wanted to narrate one of my earlier ones, and I said no, I don't think I have the voice for it anyway. And plus, I drink and smoke, so I don't want. They won't let me do that in the booth. But Scott Brick came out of nowhere. He was an actor, you know, in L.A., and he's now the voice of John Corey. So yes, but now I insist that, you know, I can do that. I guess you know, we're not changing. So, and Scott knows this, so his price has gone up, obviously. He knows that they're going to come to him, and, you know, and they don't have a choice, because I said, you know, this is the guy I want. Others, you know, other narrators have all been good. I mean, you know, I mean, I've listened to all of them, but not through. I mean, I want to sit there for 16 hours listening to my own book, but I want to see it and make sure that, you know, the narrator knows what he's doing. Some of them, you know, they're pretty good. It's a skill, it's an art, and, you know, I respect it, but I could not do it.
Well, thank you all very, very much for
Thank you.
coming. We've come to the end of our conversation, but we always give away a book, well, when I remember, to those of you who bought a book, and therefore you should have a numbered ticket in your book. And Larry, how many numbers are we talking about? 33? Okay. I want you to hand me your book, because that's the book we're going to give away.
Okay.
Well,
Right. So, Nelson, we're going to give away Taylor's book, because I feel that most of you here probably have not read it, and you'll very much enjoy it. Could you pick a number between 1 and 33?
oh God, 17.
You have to look at your number, and if that person is not here, they lose. Is there a 17 in the crowd? Apparently not. All right, so you're gonna have to try again.
No, 17. Okay. Let's do 13. Lucky 13.
Oh, look at everybody. There are people who said they would come and their books are up front with numbers
Okay.
in them. That's the reason they're not here. Ha ha, we'll tell them later. If you'd only 18 and 13, you've already lost.
Another number?
Well, yeah, one
Let's
more.
try 7. Lucky 7.
Hey.
Aha, we have a winner. Wonderful. I will give it to you. So let's thank Nelson and Taylor very much.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. Thanks, Taylor.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
So what we're going to do, Nelson, would you prefer to sit at the lower table behind us today?
Sure. Yeah.
All right, so we're just going to clear this up for a minute. While we do that, if you could fold up your chairs and lean them against that wall, they will slide off this wall and decapitate you. So don't go over there. And then if you'll line up by number, and we'll proceed with the signing. Thank you all very, very much for coming.
Absolutely. Thank
You, Shelley.
Yeah,
Yeah, I hadn't known about it.
it's an annual thing. I can't see what I'm doing. I'm sorry. We should make a point of turning off. See, it was amazing how clear Nelson's voice